Chapter 13. Gasp. Holly Angelo looked like a red-headed scarecrow dressed in pink goose down. She was over 6 feet tall with limbs like Daddy Longlegs. As soon as she saw Josh, she wrapped her arms around him with a shriek so loud every head for a quarter mile popped out of its tent like turtles coming out of their shells. Standing next to her were several curious Sherpas, 3 camera guys, a personal chef, and a massage therapist. The chef and the massage therapist were shivering and would be dead before morning unless somebody found them warmer gear. Josh wriggled out of her tentacles and held her at arm's length so she couldn't snag him again. "You haven't changed a bit," he said with his trademark grin, meaning, I think, "Holly, you are still a pain in the crevasse." Her hawk-like brown eyes darted around for her next victim, which happened to be me. Peek! Luckily, the drawn-out version of my name doubled her over with a coughing fit, and she wasn't able to get to me. You would think that her chef or massage therapist would have come to her aid, but they just stood there shivering, watching their employer bent over, clutching her knees. "Bad cough," Josh says, when she was finally able to right herself. "No big deal. You know, altitude, dry air. We'll have Doc Krieger take a look at you." He was still smiling, but the grin looked a little more genuine. He did not want to take Holly Angelo up the mountain any further than he had to. In her current condition, it didn't look like she was going to get very far. I followed him over to meet the film crew, JR, Will, and Jack. They all looked fit, and he thanked them for coming up. "Happy to be here," JR said, then whispered, "Do us a favor, Josh. Put us as far away from Holly as possible." "No problem," Josh looked over at the gasping reporter. Holly was already telling the Sherpas where to pitch her pink tent, which was only slightly smaller than the headquarters tent. Josh frowned when he saw she was erecting the monstrosity right next to his and my tent, but he didn't say anything to her. He looked back at JR and pointed to a spot about 75 feet away. "Best I can do." "Fine," said JR, and he and the others headed over to the spot with their gear. Josh rubbed his temples. "I probably don't need to tell you this, but you need to be very careful about what you say to Holly. She's a reporter, and anything you tell her is fair game. Just remember, she is more interested in herself than her career than she is about you." "What about the film crew?" I asked. "Nah, no worries there. We own the footage. When we edit it down, we'll make you look good no matter how you screw up," he grinned. "Just kidding. Let's go over to the mess tent and I'll introduce you to the other climbers. Just keep in mind, they know you're my son, but we haven't told them we're trying to get you to the top." "Why?" "Because they've paid upward to $100,000 to summit. In a way, we're using their money to get you up there. They might get upset." "So what am I supposed to tell them?" "That you're here with me and don't expect to make it past Camp 4 or 5. He looked back at Holly's direction. "I guess I better fill her in too, so she keeps her big mouth shut. I'll meet you over at the mess tent." He sighed and put on his charming grin again and headed toward Holly, who was shrieking orders at the Sherpas. The Sherpas, for the most part, were ignoring her every command. The mess tent was nearly as big as the headquarters tent, but a lot more crowded. It was also smoky from the kerosene lamps and stoves and cigarettes. None of the clients were smoking, but almost every Sherpa had a cigarette dangling out of his mouth as he stood to the side holding a plate of food. Sanjo was manning the noodles, and I went over to say hello. "How's it going?" "What was the terrible sound outside?" he asked. "A reporter?" "Injured?" "Not yet." I looked around and noticed Zopa wasn't there. "Where's Zopa?" Sanjo just shrugged. A climber walked over and held up his plate. Sanjo scooped some noodles onto it with a big smile. The man sniffed the pile, grunted, and walked away. "What do you think of your fellow climbers?" Sanjo asked. "I didn't like that guy," I said, then looked around the tent and did a head count. 7 women, 16 men, including the rude grunter. 2 of them had signed up for a summit attempt. 10 of them had signed up for a summit attempt. I tried to pick out which ones they were, but it was hard to figure out. Fitness helped, but getting through the death zone was more about your blood oxygenation and luck. Things even the fittest climber had absolutely no control over. Most of the climbers appeared to be in their 30s or early 40s, and of those, only 5 or 6 looked in good enough shape to get to the top. I could see why Josh was worried about the climbing season. I told Sunjo that I was surprised to see the Sherpas smoking. Most of them believe they will die on the mountain, he said, so why not enjoy yourself while they wait? But doesn't smoking mess up their climbing? Only if they run out of tobacco, Sunjo answered. But Zopa brought up several cartons of cigarettes to sell to them. Monks weren't supposed to use any stimulants. I guess the rule didn't preclude them from selling them. Oh, don't look so surprised, Sunjo said. Zopa will give the profits to the Tibetan monks. They are very poor. As you saw on the way here, the Chinese are not favorable toward them. KG monk reason number 2. What? Never mind. I guess I'd better go mingle with the other climbers. Do you want some noodles? They're very good. Sure. And they were good. I'm not much of a mingler, which drove Rolf crazy, since he is perhaps the greatest mingler on the planet. I've seen him go up to a complete stranger and ask for the time, even though Rolf always wears a perfectly good watch on his wrist, just to get a conversation started. But I don't think even Rolf could have cracked this crowd. They had been at base camp for a couple weeks now and had bonded into inseparable groups. This wasn't the first time I'd run into this. GSS always got out late for summer, and by the time I arrived at climbing camp, the other kids had always picked their climbing partners. This left me with the kid who had virtually no previous climbing experience, or, if I was lucky, the climbing instructor. Vincent told me that good writers are lousy minglers. They are too busy eavesdropping, as he put it, gathering grist for their literary mills. So because no one was paying an iota of attention to me, I just wandered around and gathered grist. We should have been up to ABC by now. ABC stands for Advanced Base Camp, which is the next permanent camp on the north side of the mountain. We would have been if Josh hadn't ditched us for a so-called son. The so-called son was standing 5 feet away from the two guys talking. I didn't even know he had a son. Neither did I, and I read every article, every written thing about him before I plopped down my life savings. I hear the reason we're stuck here is because he's waiting for a film crew and a reporter from New York. They came in today. No film, no glory, I guess. Josh is a publicity hound. Dr. Leah Krieger is the coldest fish I'd ever met. Straight from Nazi Germany, if you ask me. I think she's here to perform experiments on us, not treat us. Poor George, do you really think he had a heart condition? I don't know, but George's wife begged Krieger to put in a bad report. She never wanted him to climb the mountain in the first place, and she's the one with all the money. Before they got married, George didn't have 2 pennies to rub together. I wandered over to William Blade's camp this morning. I couldn't tell if I saw him or not, but I think I got close enough because one of his bodyguards rushed over and blocked my way as I tried to walk past his tent. Think he'll make it to the top? He already has as far as I'm concerned. You know what I mean, the summit. If he can't do it on his own 2 feet, his bodyguards are big enough to carry him on their backs. William Blade was a famous actor. I'd seen most of his films and thought he was great. I heard there are 3 people up at ABC with HAPE. They're coming down tomorrow. Where they're luckier than the guy who died on the south side yesterday, stepped out of his tent in the middle of the night to pee. Idiot was wearing slippers. He slid 200 yards down a slope into a crevasse so deep the Sherpa say is probably still falling. He should have been wearing crampons, or at least have his axe with him so he could self-arrest. Self-arrest has nothing to do with law enforcement. It's one of the first things they teach you in mountaineering. If you start sliding down an icy slope with nothing to grab onto, you better know how to stop yourself by digging in your crampons and punching your axe into the ice and hanging on for dear life. All steep slopes end badly in trees, solid walls, or deep holes. Screaming in terror doesn't slow you down one bit, one of my instructors told me. If you want to live, you'd better learn to avoid the void. Self-arrest wasn't my best climbing skill. Hearing the guy dying because he stepped up to go to the bathroom made my skin crawl. Josh is so cute. What do you think he'd do if I snuck into his tent one night? I don't think that's included in the permit fee. If you wait until you're above 20,000 feet, nothing will happen. More your lungs will shut down, and the most interesting part of my grist gathering got cut off by the entrance of Holly Angelo. Hello, everyone. My name is Holly Angelo. I'm a journalist from New York, and I'll be joining you on top of the world. Holly did not mingle. She mangled. Her gasps were met with other gasps, not because of the thin air, although a lot of oxygen was sucked out of the mess tent when she walked in. All conversation stopped. A blade of food dropped. A Sherpa nearly swallowed the cigarette he was smoking, then made a mad dash for the back entrance with 5 or 6 other Sherpas. I was going to join them, but I was too slow. Talons with bright red fingernail polish latched onto my parka. "Where do you think you're going?" Holly whipped me around to face with a surprising strength. I need to talk to you." Okay. Now, I've seen your pitiful tent, and I think you'll be a lot more comfortable in my tent." I thought I would faint. "I have a lot of room and an extra cot." No one hauled a cot to base camp, but she had one to spare. "And my food is much better than this swill. Pierre is creating right now, and Ralph has his massage table set up if you need a rub down." Your father said it was up to you." Thanks, Dad. Coughing fit. I thought about sneaking out while she was coughing, and she would straighten up and old Peak would be gone. Poof. But then I thought about what Josh had told me. Be very careful what you say and figure out if it applied to what I did. It's rude to disappear when someone is hacking their lungs out. "We have so much to discuss," she said when the fit was over, which seemed to have helped her gasp. "Your mom and I go way back. We've been friends for years." If that had been the case, I would have recognized her name the first time I saw the byline above the article she'd written. "She would never forgive me if I didn't watch out for you up here." "I appreciate the offer," I said, trying to give her my version of Josh's charming grin, which probably looked more like a scowl. "But I think I'll stay in my own tent." This was a return with a genuine scowl. I didn't care. There was no way I was going to be her tent mate. "But you'll have your meals with me," she said, as if it wasn't even open to a question. I was holding the plate of noodles, which had cooled and congealed and wasn't looking the best. "Not every meal," I hedged, "but yeah, I'll eat with you once in a while." Her scowl deepened, and I thought she was about to say something nasty when I was saved by Josh. "Okay, people," he announced, "tomorrow we head to ABC." A cheer went up. "It'll take 3 days and 2 nights to get there if everything goes well. We'll spend 2 nights at ABC, then come back down. You know the routine. Climb high, sleep low," the team chanted in unison. "Leah will check you tonight to get a baseline on your blood, etc., then check you again up at ABC to see how you're doing." This news was met with less enthusiasm. "She's waiting for you at the aid tent." He pinned a sheet of paper on the tent pole. "She wrote down your exam times. Don't be late." "Heil Hitler," a climber muttered under his breath. Josh shot him a look, and he turned bright red. Nobody got to the summit unless the expedition leaders said they were going up. It was best to stay on the captain's good side. "What about the puja ceremony?" someone asked. A puja is a Buddhist blessing ritual that most climbing parties went through prior to going up the mountain. "We'll be going to ABC 2 more times in the next few weeks," Josh said. "We'll hold our puja before one of those. I want to get an early start tomorrow." A couple Sherpas didn't look too happy about skipping the puja. "Pack just enough food for the trip," Josh continued. "It will be a hard climb, and you don't want to be carrying any more weight than necessary." The speech ended, and the climbers gathered round the sheet. Josh walked over to Holly and me. "You two won't be coming. I'm holding JR, Jack, and Will back too. You haven't acclimatized to go higher." "Then why don't you wait a few days?" Holly asked. "We can all go up together." It was a good question, mostly because I didn't imagine being stuck at camp alone with Holly for the next several days. Josh lowered his voice. "I'd like nothing better than to wait, but most of the people here have been here for weeks. If I don't get them higher, they'll riot. A third of them only signed up for ABC, so when we come back, they'll be gone, which will make things easier around here. I'll take you up to ABC as soon as I get back down. I can't hold them back because of latecomers."